So the question is the problem with women something specifically against women, or something that is more about being painted in a corner because you've already got revelations and you need a new one? Well, the Mormons typically have an easy way out, since they have this like instant revelation thing whenever they want. But I'd say it's actually a mix, at least in the Mormon church, in the LDS church. Because they have the opportunities, and the previous president actually said in an interview when asked, this was in I think the late 90s, something like that. He was asked about female priesthood, and he basically said that there's not really a problem with it, but there's no one working for it. So it might even be that the ordained women thing, for example, happened 10, 20-ish years too late. There might have been an opening in previous church leadership. It's hard to say. So I'd say it's a mix, because they do have the issue where they have scripture that says, okay, so women are this, this, and this, and basically chain them in the kitchen, sort of, and make babies. But they've had this kind of issue before, but with the blacks, so to speak, as they say. I read some horrible quotes when I checked this out. There used to be a lot of N-words in the encyclicals, so to speak. Yeah, it was not nice. So they had this before, they can solve it, same way they always did, but they'll always end up having this kind of core on the side, the hardcore ones, that will say that, no, this is not the doctrine that was given to Joseph Smith or Brigham Young, so this actually, we're not good with this change. And there's been quite a few splinter groups formed this way, including a couple that still practice polygamy, like we've seen in the news a couple of years ago when the Child Protective Services in Texas, I think it was, basically had to get the FBI to raid a compound and bring a couple hundred still like underage teenage girls that have been put into polygamous marriage. So basically what happens, they can change it, but it usually means they'll have a new splinter group to deal with at that point. So when the new revelations come in, do the scripture get changed to fit? To an extent, yes, but not that much. Usually it's just handled the same way most like normal, in square quote, Christians do it. Still in the Bible, but who cares? We just ignore it for now. That's pretty much how it goes.
What way do they get these revelations? Like, is there a big announcement? Does someone just, do they come in a dream?
Well, so how do the revelations come? Well, I don't actually know, because the president of the church will basically just make an announcement that, by the way, dudes, God just spoke to me, so here's what he had to say. And sort of like the Pope, I guess. So what's the relationship between the Mormon Church and Catholic Church? Well, I mean, I'd probably say that they are more friendly generally with Protestants, but I'm not entirely sure there. They usually cooperate fairly well with most like normal Christian denominations, except for the really like hardcore Baptist churches in the American South, because the American South, that kind of Baptist will consider the Mormons as polytheists, which is sort of technically almost true-ish, depending on how you look at it, because one of the goals of being a Mormon, if you live a proper good life, is that you might actually be able to get all of God's powers and create your own universe with all your own spirit children and do the same thing again. So you can, it's a kind of nice carrot and reward. Hi, I'm a missionary from the Mormon Church, want to become a god. Kind of cool, depending on how you do it. So how did I get disenchanted with the church? Well, I mean, I guess part of it was really just the standard religious kid thing. It's Sunday, I don't want to get out of bed to go to church. But There's also, since I grew up in a very liberal and very secular or atheist country, I always getting a bit up around age 10, 11, 12. I started to have actually more than just children's conversations with people. So like conversations with others wouldn't be me just trying to find my way into like, okay, so how do I preach the gospel to this person? Which usually ended horribly because I was a little kid, I didn't read the gospel properly. But so mostly just reading other thinkers, having fun with, well, being a rebel and having fun with copies of the Satanic Bible. It's very fun when like preachers and stuff go up to you on the street and you just show a copy of that book and they'll go. And it's basically reading about science and just slowly figuring out that this does not fit. And then somewhere mid-teens, something happened at church. I don't know what, but most of like both my parents left. So I had basically really quit at that time, but that basically gave me the final push. Like, okay, so you're actually stopping going to church, then okay, yeah, okay, here's the deal. I don't want to go either. Just so you know. An exodus out of the church, that depends a bit on how you look at it. They are still very actively recruiting new members. But for example, I saw some numbers where in some areas in the US, the ordained women excommunication thing had actually led to a reduction in attendance to church amongst both men and women by 2-figure amounts in some areas. Not a properly controlled study though, so with a pinch of salt on those numbers, but things like this are definitely having an effect on older members. But they're still recruiting enough to adjust. When I was a member, the church had 9 million members. Last figure I heard was 15. So people are leaving, but more are joining. Yeah, I actually saw some Mormon missionaries the other day. I did not say hi. Well, I'm not sure really what their look on like disillusioned Catholics is, because I've sort of avoided the missionaries last couple years. They visited my brother once to see if he would go back to church, and the Mormons do this thing where missionaries are always from a different country. So Swedish missionaries might go to US, and the Americans end up in Sweden, and so on. And so these probably American-born and raised Mormons met my brother and tried to bring him in again, and then realized that, wait a minute, he's an atheist? And basically stopped talking really. They did not really know how to deal with that. Because in the US, you leave the Mormon church for a different church. Pretty much. But yeah, Sweden, the default position is effectively atheist, even if it's usually just because you don't care. So I really don't know how that would play out with how their recruitment is doing now and what they target. Yeah, so what do Mormons say about Joseph Smith being an actual convicted fraudster? Well, I would say it's either an elaborate kind of justification thing for those that are have actually been historically read up on the history, but I think most will just basically think that you're slandering Joseph Smith. They will usually not have heard about it, I think. Well, so going abroad for missions, being expensive. Yeah, when I was a kid, I actually had like an envelope on my wall where I was supposed to put a little bit of my allowance money to save for my mission. But I think one of the reasons they do this is that they want you to still be fairly young, and they want you in a circumstance where the church are your only friends, because you're in a foreign country. If you do it at home, there will probably be a bit too many distractions. And I would guess that that is why. It helps you to actually focus on doing your mission. Do they pay for themselves, or do the church fund it? I'd say both. What it typically entails, like you will, if you've been good, you will have saved up money. Then you'll get your calling on which nation to go to, and then you'll be given language studies for the relevant language. So the American missionaries going to Sweden, for example, will have spent some time in a Mormon church learning Swedish. And with horrible American accents, yes. But if it's required, they will get support, but not exactly luxurious support. So, anyone new since the Osman, in pop culture, Mormon pop culture, who is the Osman?
The Osman.
That's interesting revelation.
Right. I don't remember the name of the band, but there is actually an American band that does sort of rockish kind of things, who are like openly Mormon. And we had the most awesome thing on Swedish TV a while ago, because they were gonna play in this TV show, and they also have Richard Dawkins as a guest. And Richard Dawkins, and when they start like talking, and the singer from the band is there, so he's talking, and he's like, well, he brought up the fraudster thing and all of that, and started laying into him really. And then the TV host goes, yeah, okay, yeah, I know you need to go because you're playing for us later. So the poor guy did not really get a chance to respond. And Richard Dawkins was actually very gracious and apologized profusely. He did not know the guy would not get a chance to respond. But well, there is one band at least who are actually big enough to actually end up on Swedish television. I just don't know what they're called.
Killers. Roger Barrows was the Killers as well.
The Ultimates.
I am so happy that's older than me, that picture. Well, I mean, an interesting thing about Mitt Romney, though, is when he was a governor rather than a presidential candidate, a lot of the policies that he attacked Obama for, he actually instituted as a governor. But yeah, so you can, including things like abortion rights, all of that kind of stuff. A lot more tolerant of it than the rhetoric when he went up in the presidential race. How does the church stand on evolution? Science in general?
Yeah.
I'd say that's a very mixed picture. They have some issues with this. They made a few mistakes in the early days. So for example, one of the tenets of the church is that the American Indians, like the native population of America, is actually descendants of Jews, a family that emigrated across the nation. Some awesome children's cartoons were made of this, by the way. But then science gets around and actually gets this DNA technique that we can check this. And basically, the honest one says, yeah, this is a problem. I don't know what to do with it. But most of them will just push it away, ignore it as far as possible. Evolution, what I usually heard what I say would be a mix of creationism or, well, God designed evolution. That kind of thing, basically. Excommunication and, well, if I'm a friend with people in the church, well, I'd say that varies. Like immediate family left, pretty much most of them. I'd say I have one aunt still in the church who is talking very happily with me. She actually helped me double check some facts for this. She thought it was awesome that I'm going to talk about the church and its issues in women's issues, because she's active in ordaining women. Then there's another aunt on my father's side of the family where there's not a lot of contact, but it's not an active shunning. they'll show up at big parties like my sister's wedding, funerals, and that kind of thing. But I know that it does happen in, especially in the US, that people who leave the church will get shunned or ignored. So it happens, but I can't say if it's a common thing. Well, someone who is excommunicated, then it is, yeah, then you probably should not have too much with them to do, although perhaps out of compassion for them, to perhaps guide them back on the right path. It depends on why you're excommunicated, I guess. But it's not on the level of like Scientologists. And, yeah, how to sell, well, should I say how to sell basically being happy without a life after death? Something like that. Well, I'm actually not sure you can. If someone has a really strong need to believe that there is life after death, you probably can't change it that much. But what you can probably do is, like, if they have the angle of, well, so what's the meaning of life? Like, when I die, what will have been the meaning of my life? And there you can sort of engage that through, well, you can make a meaning to your life through learning about the universe, being in awe of how awesome, watching out in the, for example, the Hubble pictures did that a lot, because the universe is cool. I don't need a God to feel that it's kind of awesome to actually be alive and be able to at least learn a bit about those kind of things. So I think that's basically the only angle you can go in for, because they'll either really need a life after death thing, and then you cannot win that fight. So you try with just selling awe of reality to show that it can actually be kind of cool to be alive and learn about the universe. If that doesn't work, I don't know really what could work. A book by Richard Dawkins, yeah.